I'm here to negotiate the surrender of the, Gorgonzolas. Now, here's our proposal.
Hey!
Take them.
He's selling us down the river. The guy's a regular Arnold Benedict.
I mean, switch them off, take them apart, steal their batteries, whatever it is you people do. Hey. Is that my JVC?
There will be no surrender. There will be no mercy. All organized scum must die.
Yeah!
Bomb them all the way back to preschool.
Recon estimates organized scum strength at 16.
16? Where'd they get 16 from?
7 Gorgonites and 9 people.
Hello, listening people.
Hello.
You're listening to Spin Polish Presents Pictures Powwow. I am one of your hosts, Ryan Sawinski.
And I'm Bartek. Now shut up. Guys, it's a reference to the movie coming up. Don't actually shut up.
Yeah, don't shut up, Bartek. Bartek, in fact, is just plain Bartek. I was waiting for in the movie for him to call him Plain Alan for the rest of the movie because he says, my name is just Plain Alan. He's like, okay, I was waiting for that joke. But we are doing our show, Pictures Powwow, the show in which we cover a movie that has come recommended. If you can read, the title says what movie we're covering, but just for clarification, the movie we're covering is one that Bartek recommended.
Mm-hmm.
Bartek, the film, what is it? Which film did you recommend?
It is the 1998 film Small Soldiers.
Directed by Joe Dante and starring pretty much a lot of actors that he has worked with before.
Mm-hmm.
And you recommended this?
I did.
Why?
Well, we have to pick something for the show, but also this is a this is a film that I grew up with. It's a genuine childhood classic for me.
That's interesting because when we've covered lots of childhood classics, they've been mine, and I've been under the assumption that you have had this experience as well because we're the same age, we grew up in the same country where these movies played on TV or they were very much came out when we were alive, but a lot of the time you have slept on them, and then when you said last episode that we're doing this, I got so excited because it's like, not only is it because it's been a while since I've seen it and this was a classic for me, but it was also like Bartek and I can connect because we've finally seen like it. We've
mentioned
we've
it
had
in the
other
past.
ones,
Yeah.
but like it just feels so rare. Like when I recommend like, now let's do this kids movie that seems iconic to everyone our age, you're like, I never saw it, never heard of it before.
I should have picked Polish dub Toy Story.
Yeah. Yeah, with that one Polish guy who narrates them all.
Oh, the Lector. No,
But-
mine was genuine dubbed.
So Small Soldiers 1998. We're going to be talking about this in depth, so if you have not seen this film before, give it a watch because we're going to be talking about spoiler stuff. This movie is literally 22 years old, so you've had the chance to see it.
If you're less than 22 years old...
I mean, you've had the chance to see it. I mean, it's been...
my brother's 1999, so...
It's been in existence their whole entire lives. So, we're going to be talking about it. Worth a watch. It's a quick, easy watch. If you're squirmish about violence towards children, then maybe not. But honestly, that's a part of the appeal, isn't it?
Yeah, no one dies in it, don't they?
But there's violence.
There's violence, but there's also no blood or death.
No, there is
so-
blood.
Is there blood? I know there's
He's
stabbing.
bleeding from his leg when he gets
Okay.
shot with the cob of corn holders.
There's bleeding, but it's at night.
But it's red.
Okay. I didn't remember, but alright.
And also, his hand when it gets cut in the
Oh, right,
kitchen,
right.
there is blood.
Right.
There's blood.
And he does die after that, so there's death.
And then he's a ghost for the rest of the movie. It's odd. No, so Small Soldiers, you recommended this, a genuine childhood classic. Obviously, that's your history with it. My history is it's also a genuine childhood classic. So how did this film enter your life? Did you somehow see this in the cinema? Was this one that was regularly on TV? Was it something that it was bought for you on video or DVD?
We had a DVD of it, and I can't remember the context of it being bought. If my best guess is that someone just brought it home and said, "Hey, I bought this. Watch it. See if you like it." And yeah, I watched it and I did like it. And I know that my brother, who was born 1999, so obviously was very young when I was very into this film, I think as a youngin, he was also into it, but every time I've brought it up in recent years, he doesn't quite remember it. So I'm very curious, like, if he ever does get around to watching it now as an adult, will he remember things? Will he like it? Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember this on TV all the time. This was like a classic staple. It was this and Jumanji.
Hmm.
I always feel like these movies would back to back one another because they were those weirdly adult, surreal ideas for family movies.
Hmm.
Would you agree? You've seen Jumanji, yeah?
Maybe once a long time ago. I can't
But
remember.
there's this weird kind of feeling when we grew up, when that era, we've talked about many times before on the show, where there was these family kids films with extreme adult elements that are really jarring to
Yeah,
watch.
The trivia,
but they're very thrilling to watch as
yeah,
well.
The trivia said that it had to be scaled back from a more like older teens, adults.
Yeah,
audience.
which makes sense. And Joe Dante's back catalogue makes a ton of sense because he did Gremlins and Gremlins 2, the new batch, which I'll talk about because this film is very reminiscent of those two films, primarily the second Gremlins. You know, the idea of cute little things that turn evil running around all over town making mayhem.
Like Chip Hazard.
Like Chip Hazard. That's exactly right. So, you know, the innocence of something childlike causing destruction all over town and murder.
Yeah.
Just like Gremlins. But we'll get into that. But, you know, he has that weird adult sensibility. He did, like, one of the segments in the Twilight Zone movies. He did Inner Space, The Howling. You know, he's an interesting filmmaker. And, of course, him doing this and it being originally made to be more towards teens and then scaled back towards more kids and family, you have this weird mishmash of things going on. So I would say, Bartek, I'm not going to speak for you, but I would say, for me, the legacy of this movie, the most iconic thing of this movie, and for most people, is the evil Barbie dolls sequence. I think that's kind of like one of the most iconic things that this movie is, like a carrying over of it.
Okay, yeah.
Would you agree? That was what I always think of. Like, Chip Hazard, obviously, but I always remember, like, the fact that they turn these Barbie Gwendy dolls into, like, evil monsters with, like, knives for hands, and that whole sequence where they transform them with the...
Yeah, and their dialogue, like, has not quite double meanings, but, like, it seems more reminiscent of something a lot more girly than, what they are monstrously.
And it's the more horror element of the movie, you know, the idea of your toys
the camera
literally
shots, the
turning...
light's not working, and then you see that.
The static light flickering, and like the idea of your childhood toys tying you down and wanting to stab you is something very scary.
And it preys upon that idea of, like, dolls can be creepy. Yeah.
And I think a part of it too is, like, people remember that, and then you watch Toy Story, you watch Small Soldiers, and it's a lot more friendly than that. But then also, it's really not.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point, actually, in terms of something unique about it. Like, yeah, what you were saying there about, you know, Chip Hazard and the toys, like, I always think of those more than the Barbie doll thing, but certainly in terms of something more unique, like, obviously it drew upon inspiration from, like, you know, imagery from Gulliver's Travels, where they're tying down Kirsten Dunst and all that, but yeah, I'd agree with that.
Like, I'm not saying that Chip Hazard and the rest don't have any iconic things. I think just in general, this movie, one of the big, you know, elements that is remembered is evil Barbies.
Yeah, it's definitely the horror aspect of the film.
Which I think at the time was more of a novel idea than now, the idea of Barbie being an evil thing.
Yeah, well, they had to go the extra mile of, like, giving them a more generic name, like, not a brand name, Gwendy dolls.
And making them voiced by Christina Ricci and Sarah Michelle Gellar. Yeah. Who are the perfect casting choice for that. It's great. So, Bartek, when was the last time you watched this film?
God, if I had to hazard a guess, Chip Hazard a guess.
I was going to say that. Chip Hazard a guess?
I think I might have not been a teenager yet. It's been a very long time. Like, I'd seen it so many times as a kid that, like, I think, like, 1 in 7 lines came to my head before they happened. There were, like, 1 or 2 music tracks that I, like, almost completely remembered.
Yeah.
But, yeah, it's been such a long time that I actually found new things or things that I never knew about before. Like, and when I started watching it, I'd say that was back around the time where I wasn't too used to English being my primary language. And also I wasn't, you know, knowledgeable about actors, and there was a whole bunch of themes about, like, technology and learning that completely went over my head. So,
yeah,
in a way, it was like a trip down memory lane and seeing a completely new film in a way.
Yeah, it's been a while since I've seen it. I think I saw it in my teenage years the last time I saw it, and I remember... that was around the time in which, you know, like I was pursuing like this field that we are both interested in of acting, and me being me, as we've heard on the show, I like having this knowledge of actors and actresses and films and production and all that. And it's one of those things where it's like I'd watched Small Soldiers being a teenage boy, knowing that Phil Hartman, who was in this film, he had died and was murdered, and that's a whole thing that can be a topic of discussion. But like, I forgot when I was a teenager until like the very end that this was like one of his last movies. Like, he got murdered.
Yeah, apparently it was released like a month after he was murdered.
And you have that post-credit scene of a blooper of him, being Phil Hartman and being like, was that too much? And I remember being a teen, seeing that, and it made me really upset because it's just like, knowing who Phil Hartman was, and for us, he was in our childhood very prevalently, outside of just The Simpsons. He was in Jingle All the Way and this movie and several other projects. Obviously for Americans, he was in their lives more because they had Saturday Night Live and all these other things that we didn't necessarily have.
Yeah.
And then it made me think of just Phil Hartman. And then when I was watching it again for this episode, I forgot that he really isn't in it that much.
Yeah.
And it made me upset that he wasn't in it that much, considering this is one of the last things he kind of did. And then I think of, like, in Futurama, how Zach Brannigan was going to be him. Like, that was going to be him doing it, and then obviously he didn't get to live to do it, and how that character just is Phil Hartman. And so watching it this time, there was, like, this somber mood to it all. But then also, I got to say, watching it this time round, memory lane triggering all this stuff, but also, like, there was lots of things that I found very interesting, like, from an adult standpoint, like all this social commentary about corporate America, and the interest that I want to discuss of the fact that this is a pre-9/11 movie, right? And the film has villains being G.I. Joe Americana soldiers, and how in a post-9/11 world that wouldn't really fly as strong in a kids movie, I don't think.
Yeah, there were
Maybe
explosions hitting buildings, yeah.
Not even that, but the idea of the bad guys being the American military.
Yeah,
the American military. I gotta say, though, I don't know if this affected you, but we are both fans of Men in Black when we were young, right?
Yeah, I'd say so.
One of the things I've always loved about this movie, even from a kid, was Tommy Lee Jones as Chip Hazard, because unlike most people our age, I did not like Men in Black for Will Smith. I liked Men in Black for Tommy Lee Jones, the old white guy. And as a kid, I recognized it was the same voice. And I was just like, I fucking love this guy. Even as a kid, I was like, I love Tommy Lee Jones. And that's a big draw of the movie. What about you? Is that a draw that was something?
Again, because I wasn't too knowledgeable about performers when I was younger, that was only a thing that I learned in maybe recent years. I'm like, oh, the Chip Hazard was Tommy Lee Jones all along. That's interesting. So coming back, it's like, there he is. It's Man of the House.
Yeah, Man of the House. So how was it for you this time round watching it?
Yeah, it was great. I liked it.
You liked it?
Yeah.
Thought it was still good, still holds up, maybe exceeded what you remembered of it?
In some ways, yeah. I think towards the end I was thinking, like, I'm enjoying this and nostalgia is a huge factor of it, but I need to try to, think about it more without the nostalgia aspect, so... That's
true. Yeah. I was doing that a lot as well. Like, I was making a lot of notes about critical things, and I have a lot of negative criticism of this movie. I was speaking about it late into the night with my wife, who had rarely seen this movie. She always had caught it in parts on TV, but never seen it as a cohesive whole. She's like like with me, was Big Fat Liar. Always missed a part of it and never saw it as a whole in one sitting. So I have a lot of negatives, a lot of negatives. But the fact of the matter is, I'm willing to admit that I don't think that this is really a good movie, but it's an entertaining movie, like Star Wars, The Revenge of the Sith. But unlike Star Wars, Revenge of the Sith, a thing that boosts it even more for me is what you just said. I have nostalgia for this movie, and nostalgia can be a deadly thing, as we've seen in recent years. But the fact of the matter is, I'm willing to admit in this review that if you do not like this movie, and the fact that I do, I'm not going to disagree, because I think a part of it is I have such a childhood nostalgia for this movie. But I do see a lot of flaws in this movie, to the point in which I'm willing to admit it's not a good movie. It's a fun movie though, and I love the fact that it's a mess. This movie's a weird psychological nightmare world mess. But overall, one thing I will say is I walked into this Bartek expecting one negative thing to be apt, and I was proven wrong for pretty much 99% of the movie. I was expecting the CGI to be bad. I was expecting the CGI of these toys walking around to be bad. And honestly, still looks good.
Yeah, it had a very animatronic feel to it because they're toys, so you kind of want there to be an artifice.
But, you know, I was expecting it to really stand out a lot more, as from that era, a lot of CG elements do. Like, Jumanji's CG looks terrible now. But, like, yeah, I was shocked to see that the CGI still holds up really, really well. I was devastated. Like, I was expecting, like, me to walk in being like, well, the CGI is still terrible. Like, it's terrible from today's standards. But honestly, only one or two times did I find it distracting. But even then, it was because I was honestly keeping an eye out for it. But honestly, I think it looks great.
Yeah.
So, Bartek, with this film... you talked about your childhood thing. This is a movie about toys. Which one did you always want as a toy?
I think I always really did like Chip Hazard.
You like Chip Hazard?
Yeah.
I always wanted that one Gorgonite who gets the radio put in him.
Yeah.
I liked his design a lot as a kid.
I liked all their designs as a kid. Yeah, I was actually thinking about this early this morning because I knew the question would come, like, which one did you want? And I think to myself that I don't know if I necessarily wanted anyone from this film, but I really liked the whole idea of, like, you know, toys that interact with you. I thought, like,
yes,
that's a great idea. That should be in, like, every toy.
That's exactly right.
And
so you're Dennis Leary, okay?
And yeah, and I was thinking to myself that, like, yeah, because I watched this so early on when, like, English wasn't too great, I think I had a misunderstanding of what, like, the word defective meant, and I always mixed it up with, like, you know, interactive. Or, like, you know, really cool. So I would always look at toys and be like, man,
I wish they were defective.
These boy toys, they're not defective, but look at all these ads for girl toys that, like, interact with you and all this kind of stuff. It's like, why can't we have that in boy toys?
Boy toys. That would be a great name for a boy band. Boy toys.
Boy toys.
Next to Boy Town. No, I agree. Like, I also had that feeling as a kid, and it's just these toys in this movie. This is the nostalgia for me. I remembered these characters' visual designs, and I remembered certain characteristics. But honestly, going back to the movie, the Gorgonites don't really get much to do or much characteristics other than just this one spins around and this one's a Hunchback of Notre Dame kind of feel and this one's got a Peter Lorre accent for no reason. And I was
and one of them's apparently a girl.
The eyeball?
I'm not sure which one, but one of them is, I think, the one called Scratchet.
Okay, the one that doesn't speak words either.
The
one that flings...
apparently two of them are voiced by a guy, but one of them's meant to be a girl.
Yeah, they're all voiced by Spinal Tap, as the credits like to remind us, and all the bad guys are voiced by the Dirty Dozen, as the film likes to remind us in the credits. I was so overjoyed last episode when we were trying to remember what they were called, and you were like, the Gorgons? I'm like, I think they're Gorgonites. And no joke, for the rest of the week, I honestly didn't look it up, but I was tossing and turning all week thinking, Gorgonites, is that right? I hope I didn't fuck that up at the end of the last episode. Then the film's like, Gorgonites, David Cross. Gorgonites! And I'm just like, I was fucking right! And like my little brain just popped up being like, Childhood Ryan did a good job remembering that. Because I was worried. I was just worried like someone listening to this going, they don't even know. They were just called Gorgons.
Hey, 3 episodes, I got the national language of Pakistan wrong. Don't worry about it.
That's different. That's not as important as knowing if it's a Gorgonite.
Yeah, it's Pakistani. Who cares? Let's go with that. Yeah, I remember. One of the lines I do remember is like one of them just going Gorgons, and
yeah,
that should have been an indicator to me, like, oh, they're talking about a place, not what they are. But yeah.
But I always wanted that Peter, the radio one, because he was weird looking and he was like a Frankenstein.
He's the one that was like destroyed and fixed with radio parts. So yeah.
Yeah.
It was a Sid toy,
which doesn't factor into the movie ever. It's not like the radio thing is like something major in his personality.
Yeah, I think there was one point where they like heard the Commando Elite say something, but it didn't really matter.
Yeah, that is weird. I thought that the thing that they were going to go with was his voice was going. I thought they were going to do that old trick where his voice is it switching through all the radio channels, making sentences out of all these disparate elements of radio. I thought that's what it was going to be, but then he just had a normal voice.
Yeah,
like he was whichever one, Christopher Guest or Michael McKean, just doing a voice. And I was like, oh, okay. I thought the whole thing was he was going to have like different voices coming from the radio to form sentences.
Yeah, the Gorgonites had a lot of potential.
Yeah, that's a weird thing.
And they had a lot of design to them too. So
I want the Gorgonites. I mean, I want Chip Hazard.
Yeah.
I don't really care about the other soldiers. I want Chip Hazard. He's the one you want, right?
Yeah, he's got that design.
Yeah, and he's Tommy Lee Jones.
I want him as a toy, and I want Nick Nitro's face on me.
Nick Nitro, yeah. So this film has a lot going on. What were the things that you enjoyed about this movie?
I guess now that I've seen a lot more films, I do like that a lot of the Commando Elite scenes are playing on like military cliches. Like a lot of the lines they speak are, almost taken straight from or heavily mashed up from other like military things.
Yeah, it's a lot of like incorporate like homage to military scenes and movies.
Yeah, so it really illustrates this contrast of, it's a military film going on for them, but they're toys.
Yeah, they're toys.
They're toys, and they're also the bad guys.
I've mentioned on the show the film Patton,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a scene in this movie where I didn't remember that they just did a whole scene from Patton where he's walking in front of the American flag, and I'm like, okay, fuck, okay. Little kid Ryan saw that before Patton, great. Like,
I still haven't seen Patton, so there you go.
Yeah. All right, so you like that element of the movie. What else about it did you really enjoy as an adult? Removal of nostalgia, like as just a film. What really tickled you about it?
I mentioned earlier that I noticed the themes a lot more. This whole idea of like they mentioned the word learning throughout the film a lot, and early on it's kind of taken as like kids don't want to learn, that this is bad.
They want action.
But then that idea of learning gets extrapolated more with the idea of what this chip does, and technology as a kid. When they said chips, I was thinking like, where are the potato chips? Like I don't get what they're saying. They're putting this thing in them, but whatever.
See, as a kid who grew up on sci-fi, I knew what they were doing about.
I grew up on this. Does that count?
Yeah, no.
Does it count? Does it count if it goes over my head?
Yeah. I always wanted a crossover between this and Toy Story because they're very like, it's the old if your toys came alive.
Yeah. Well, and both of these are childhood classics of ours, so yeah.
But they're very different approaches to the idea of if your toys came alive.
Would you want to see a remake of this film with the Ali Ermey
I was surprised that he wasn't in it, right? Ali Ermey.
That's a good point, actually.
But I get why the voices weren't because they were getting the Dirty Dozen. But Ali Ermey was sorely missed.
He was the Commando Elite's drill sergeant when they were cadets.
Exactly.
That's my headcanon.
Yeah, he should have physically turned up as a real person. Like you remember in Terminator 3, Rise of the Machines, a deleted scene in that movie is that they have Arnold Schwarzenegger as like a soldier guy that they did the visual basis of the T-800 on, but he has a different voice.
I've seen that. I didn't know that was a Terminator 3 deleted scene.
Yeah, it's Terminator 3 deleted scene. And I would love that, but with Ali Ermey, but he has the voice of Tommy Lee Jones.
No, she had the voice of David Cross.
Pootie Tang!
Mine's Gizmo.
So you were saying about...
Yeah, the explanation of why they're defective, like, it made sense to me, and it's something that I never noticed about the film, so there was thought put into it.
So you're saying you really enjoyed that scene where they went to go visit that guy in the decontamination suit?
When that scene started, it confused me, like, what's going on here? But yeah.
See, I enjoyed it because that actor is Robert Picardo, who's from Star Trek Voyager, and he's my favorite character in all of Star Trek, the emergency hologram doctor, and he literally filmed this scene in between shoots for Voyager, so he had like literally a day to do it. But he's like a Joe Dante actor. Like he's one of those guys that just flips around in the movies. But like, I agree too. I like this idea that it's not the chip's fault; it's the designs. Like
Yeah,
the
the
chip
software's
is
fault.
the chip is just doing what it's meant to do. But like, it's how you program it into the software. And since the software for the two toys are designed by two different people, so the good guy, impoverished, kind of downtrodden, Native American-esque type Gorgonites have their, we just want peace and love and we've got to hide and let's not try and be confrontational, to the corporate America macho hoo-ha, let's kill everything in sight because we're America, fuck yeah, as Team America bravely stated.
I like that it wasn't just a throwaway, like, oh, the chip was made by military, so they're going to be military.
Yeah, I like that. It's not just like, oh, the chip itself is the problem. No, the chip is just following through on what's going on in their programs. I love the idea that if you programmed the software differently for the chip hazard people, that they could be good guys.
Yeah.
Like, if it wasn't like their whole program is to basically commit genocides, because that's all their thing is, right? Like, just destroy an entire race.
Destroy the Gorgonites.
Yeah, destroy a
and
race.
anyone who allies with them.
Yeah, exactly. So, genocides. They're just like, their whole thing is genocides.
And then put on top of all of this that the head guy of the company who kind of put the pressure on these two guys to make this drastic pull gets away with it in the end. He doesn't get punished.
Yes, Dennis Leary. Yes, corporate America wins yet again. Globotech. Is there ever a movie where there's a corporate business with tech at the end that isn't evil? Because Globotech is very evil.
Yeah, I don't know. I think...
It's...
No, I'm thinking Ratchet and Clank Nanotech, but that's just the health. It's not a company.
No, it's not a
not
company.
a movie. Well, there is a movie, but...
With Paul Giamatti. I liked watching this and seeing a lot of the adult elements really played well. I liked seeing the dynamic between the toys themselves of Chip Hazard and the Gorgonites, and how there's that kind of, we are wanting to be good and peaceful, and there's no mercy. And like how straight-faced that is played, even though there is a lot of zany kid stuff where they're going to play the soundtrack and they're going to have like that scene in which, oh no, he's running over my nuts, but he doesn't actually have any, But I like the fact that the film was brutal and had I'm going to murder one of the Gorgonites off screen and we're only going to find his parts left, and all the Gorgonites are going to be really sad about that one Gorgonite that got murdered that we never got to meet. I liked how frank and brutal this movie actually was. And I did like the fact that the bad guys... the bad guys of the Chip Hazard people, they die, sure, but the bad guys that made them get to go on another day and fund wars with this new tech that they made. They're going to give them to, soldiers in South America or whatever, and it's just going to continue on being this evil thing. And at the end of the day, money solves all the problems.
I think it was South American rebels, they said.
Money is going to solve all these problems. It's a very nihilistic point of view, but I kind of love the fact that this kids movie from the 90s was this is how the world is, kids. This is not all the bad guys, get caught at the end. They didn't have that scene where David Cross puts the handcuffs on a Dennis Leary and he's like, yeah, and then then David Cross is the head of the company now or whatever, in other movies.
He gets to finish his pitch. It's you didn't listen to this pitch. Now
we didn't have David Cross being a badass at the end or whatever. He was still pathetic, but he was doing good things, short-circuiting the powers and whatnot. I'm trying to think of other things I liked. I like seeing Kirsten Dunst again. This is post Jumanji, pre Spider-Man.
Yeah, Spider-Man was 3 years later, I think.
So this is in this weird phase where she's actually a teenager. It's weird seeing her in this.
Apparently,
I forgot that she was in it.
Apparently, the main kid's one of the sons in Krippendorf's tribe.
Yep, and more importantly, he's one of the bad guy's sons in the greatest film of all time, Hobo with a Shotgun.
I think I did see that.
He plays Slick. And I can or cannot remember if he has the line of dialogue. One of the brothers in that movie has this great line of dialogue in which they're going to go murder someone with a pair of ice skates that they're wearing. And the line, the line delivery and the line is, "It's a beautiful day for a skate rape." And I can't remember if it's the kid from this movie who says that line, but if it is, God bless
They
them.
should have put that in.
They should have put that in this
Just-
movie. Yeah.
Just replace the bike with a skateboard, then it fits.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of weird adult elements, like the fact that they asked the kid if he's on crank. That was a weird moment. That was a very weird moment. I like seeing Phil Hartman. Obviously, he was different to his character in Jingle All the Way, but he was still a smug asshole.
Yeah.
Like I said, wish he was in it more. You know, considering what we know now, like, you know,
I think he had one of the best lines in the film.
which was
You know, I think World War II is my favorite one.
that was a great line, and he said it with the utmost sincerity too.
Completely unprompted.
He was watching
he was
something,
watching
but
TV,
like, yeah,
but-
it's such a weird thing to say. But like, again, it's like he's a child, right? Like he's saying in this kiddie way, where
Yeah,
it's like,
he's
I,
got-
I think the Second World War is my favorite war. Like, and it's
I
just
mean,
like he would have been one of the kids that bought the chip hazard.
Like, me thinking about Phil Hartman, you know, we saw him recently in Jingle All the Way, and he was this guy with, in a sense, a lot of social power.
Yeah.
Like, people liked him, he could get into situations easily. In this film, he has a nerd element where he's, like, super into technology,
And he's a pariah for it.
Yeah.
Because he's ruining everyone else's lives because of it.
Yeah, it's like he's not cool, but he's, like, still the smug guy that we think that...
Yeah.
The characters that he plays. So it was
Yeah.
really interesting.
Man, I miss that guy. Phil Hartman was just so fucking talented and so fucking good, and it's just like, even in this movie where he's wasted, honestly, they don't do much with him. He's asleep for most of it. He's so fucking good in this movie, and it's just such a shame that he wasn't in it more, you know? It would have been great to have more of him. I love the negotiation scene where he tries to negotiate with the chip hazards, and they're just like, no, we're not going to do that.
We don't accept mercy at this point, yeah.
We're going to take down, what was it, 17 casualties or whatever? It's like, 17? Where did they get that from? It's like,
7 plus 9.
Yeah, seven Gorgonites.
7 Gorgonites, 9 people.
9 people. And that was really brutal and fucking fucked up to think about.
They know their mats.
I'm trying to think, like, other than nostalgia, the music's really good. As we've said, the special effects and the animatronics mixture is really good. Of course, Stan Winston did this. So, of course, the toys and the special effects are going to look good. All of the Chip Hazard crew have fun personalities, even if they aren't in it that much. They do have fun personalities, and I love how wickedly evil they are and how they refuse to ever be good. I'm trying to think of what else I genuinely enjoy. Like the Barbie scene, the Gwendy scene's hilarious and disturbing. They set the boyfriend on fire. That was great.
There was a trivia point that apparently that was a reference to a Rick Mail thing in some
Great.
TV show.
Bottom, probably.
I think that was the name, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, he gets set on fire in that show a bit. I'm trying to think of what else I genuinely enjoy. I just love the look of the movie. I loved, the colors. I can't think of much else I genuinely love about this movie, though. Like, there's a lot of nostalgia here, and there's a lot of great lines. But anything else that you want to talk about in positives?
I think that mostly covers it. Like, yeah, it's a film I really love, but this time I did notice that, like, I can see why this isn't a fantastic film in general.
Yeah. So let's talk about our negatives. What are yours?
I feel like when it got to the point where... Because I remembered for sure that the final scenes of the film were the Commando Elite attacking the houses at night. When it got there, it felt like it was too soon. Like, there needed to be a bit more before it.
A bit more calm before the storm?
Bit more calm before the storm, but also I think it ties into what you said about the Gorgonites being underused. Because they get found, and then they have, like, the otherworldly people in the modern world, like, questioning things sequence, and then once it hits nighttime, we're pretty much at the climax.
Yeah.
So I feel like just a bit more of that.
Yeah. So I have a lot of negatives, but also negatives that spark questions in a healthy way, I would say.
Okay.
So one of the things I've got to mention is Gremlins is a movie that exists, as does Gremlins 2. This film has a lot in similarities with both of those movies. Like I said, innocent childhood things turn nasty, evil, and wreak havoc for destruction's sake. Gremlins 2 is primarily more what this reminds me of, because that has more of a corporate America anti-angle, in which there's an evil corporate bad guy who wants to do weird, crazy stuff, but he's like a crazy man-child weirdo. And Robert Picardo's in that movie as well, and, there's a lot of similarities in these movies. So that's something. If you've seen the Gremlin movies, you've seen this movie, but this movie is Toy Stories meets Gremlins, which is a negative on a level, because they're both made by the same filmmaker. There's a lot of little similarities, and of course the Gremlins, the first one, and I would argue Gremlins 2, the new batch, are superior movies to this one. Mm-hmm. So that's something that, that's a statement needing to be made, but I can forgive it because I grew up with this movie more than I did the Gremlins movies, honestly. But the thing, too, about it is, in Gremlins 2, the evil corporate America angle, I think, is handled way better. One of the main issues I had, very straight off the bat, is David Cross and the other guy. I can't remember that actor's name, but I know that he does a good Christopher Walken impression. I want to say his name is Jay Moore or something.
I know his last name's 3 letters, something or.
I don't understand the dynamic there. It feels like half-baked. So David Cross, very understandable. He's an optimistic nerd who believes in the whimsy of innocence and joy in toys. Mm-hmm. And the other guy is supposed to be the narcissistic corporate guy. But the problem is he isn't that fully. They don't want to fully commit to that because they need him to be a good guy at the end. And I feel like, to me, it would have been better if the dynamic there was maybe he was what we see him at the beginning of the movie, but as soon as he's given the ability to jump ship and be we see that he's an ambitious go-getter, and maybe he has his comeuppance or revelations towards the end of the movie once he's seen his carelessness
he turns
in
into
action.
Darth Vader.
Obviously, haha, but I felt like he was too half-baked as a character. And that, I know this is a little problem, but little problems build upon each other and they become big problems. And it's just David Cross, characterization, what he is, nails it. The other guy, not the actor's fault, but it's just I don't know what he was supposed to fully be.
Yeah, that's a good point. When the film started and they were chatting, they're going to the meeting, they felt even though, their characters are obviously completely different, it felt like they were, partners in a way.
Yeah.
And, they were gonna, back up each other. Then when we got to the pitch and then, David Cross, your turn's over, now it's this guy's turn, he's like, all right, let me show you how it's done.
Yeah, multimedia bitch kind of attitude.
That was the moment where I'm like, oh, I thought they were, partners in this pitch. It was a shock there for me.
And I think that is something that really throws things. So little things like that. So it's okay, maybe if this guy was more of a corporate sleaze guy and he learns a lesson at the end about that. But the weird thing is, if they did that, it would contradict the fact that corporations always win at the end, right? That was a little problem I had. One thing that I got completely thrown by was I thought for some reason that one of those two guys, David Cross primarily, I thought he was the kid's dad. In my brain, I was like, oh, and that's how he gets the toys, right? He takes his prototypes home and the kid has them, but then they're like, no. Dick Miller is a truck driver and he gives him the toys because we need the toys to be in this kid's hands. And it feels like, to me, I think, this is just me writing my own script, to streamline things, I reckon it would have been much better if one of those two corporate guys is the kid's dad, and he brings these toys home and then wreaks havoc and whatnot. And it feels like it would have streamlined a lot of things, especially if it's the David Cross one, because David Cross's whole thing is he wants peaceful, friendly toys, and that's apparently what Alan's dad
he's
wants.
no war toys.
But
policy.
then Alan's dad never follows through on that anti-war toys thing in his entire appearance in the movie. In fact, I never understand why that's referenced. If you didn't reference that, I wouldn't think that that's what the dad's all about. The dad's anti what the mum's all about, which is peace and love and hippie nonsense. He's always I'm angry and I want to be angry. So I was like, do you see what I mean?
It would have made sense if his angle was more vintage toys than anti-war or something like that.
Yeah.
Because that's kind of what they were going for. These are the cool new toys that are coming out. Here's a kid who works at his dad's store, which sells uncool toys. You've got an angle there, and it doesn't really get played much.
And I think the whole toy store angle doesn't really get much use out of it, other than they have the boat at the end. That's literally what it's there for.
Yeah.
And I feel like if you streamline and have one of those two guys from the old school toy company being the dad and they bring the thing home, even if it's not the David Cross one, but the other guy, something there would gel more and it would streamline more and it would make it more efficient to me as a story, because the dad in this movie, he doesn't do anything for me. Like, it's not the actor's fault. It's just like the character, I feel like it's just kind of like this weird mishmash of like, we're told a lot, but we're shown a lot that's different to that.
Yeah, his purpose is more to, like, tell off the kid when he thinks the kid's done,
A
something bad
lie.
again.
And that's something too. My main 3 issues is the kid, Alan, his whole arc, I want a question mark. Corporate America is a big problem I have with this movie. That's the second one.
People have that in real life too, right?
But how it's portrayed in this movie.
Yep.
And then the third one is like the bad evilness portrayed by the bad toys. I'll talk about that in a moment. But like, so the main problem I have with Alan is, what's his journey? What's his arc? What does he learn?
Yeah,
because we're told what his story is.
Yeah, we're told that he's been expelled from 2 schools because he was a troublemaker that was acting out. And it doesn't really and we see that consequences of that early on when people know rumors about him, like, oh, you're the kid that this, but yeah,
we don't know that about him. We're just told that. Like, he's not like we get that vibe from him. He doesn't come across as a bad kid. We're just told that he was one long ago.
Yeah, it would have made more sense if, and not that this is groundbreaking or anything, but like if he really wanted a girlfriend or something and this was stopping him, by the end he gets a girlfriend, that would have been a sort of arc, but that doesn't really...
I mean, they do get together at the end.
They do get together, yeah, but it's not like it was set up early on that like that's something he really wants.
I mean, he kind of has that set up because he gives a mournful look when she kisses her boyfriend.
Yeah, she has a crush. He has a crush on her.
But it's just not fully developed, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
My big problem is, like, we're told a lot, but we aren't shown a lot. So it's not like... So his whole thing is Boy Who Cried Wolf is supposed to be the conflict. So every time he tells his parents something crazy's happening, they're not going to believe him because he's a liar.
Yeah.
To make that effective, we need to have him be a liar in the movie. But we're not shown him ever being a bad kid in this film. We're told about him in a previous life outside of the movie he was, but we aren't shown any of that bad behavior.
Yeah,
so where does that factor in? And then also, I gotta say, we've been told that he had these really elaborate schemes. He never does those anything elaborate scheme-wise to undertake undermine the toys. All he does is just hit them with a baton and shit. Like, that's nothing groundbreaking in comparison to he flooded a school classroom, or he made a bomb threat, or like all these really Dennis the Menace times 10 kind of schemes. In this movie, he doesn't really do anything that matches that evil scheming kid. It's not like we needed that evil scheming kid to save the day on a level. It's just kind of like, David Cross comes in and goes, we could EMP them, and he's like, oh, that's a good idea, and that's kind of it.
Yeah, they even have that thing where, like, he comes home to give the ticket, and then Mum's like, did you do this? Did you do that? And he's like, Mum, I can do things without messing up. Is that such a crazy thing? And then that gets recontextualized later with the whole backstory thing, but yeah, like you said, we don't see anything. And now that you mention it, there was also, I found it a bit surprising when, after the first part of the climax, where it was just Christy, Alan, and the Commando Elite, they have that confrontation with, not Dennis Leary, Phil Hartman and his family, where, they're saying, like, you kidnapped, you're lying, this. And then, it takes a while for the dad to really say anything, but he's on Alan's side.
Yeah, I found that odd too, because it's like, we've seen him be against Alan this whole time.
And also, him being on his side means that he believes him about the toys, which last time it was brought up, he didn't.
Because the toy didn't speak on purpose. But this time we've seen them moving, but like, that's halfway through a scene. Like, we don't see that moment where Archer shows that he can talk. It's already been shown off screen.
Yeah.
I found that very odd, because it's like, I want to relate to Alan. I want this thing, but it's like, it doesn't work. Like, to give an example of something similar that I thought of, I know you haven't seen it, I believe, but there's a film Hocus Pocus. In the film Hocus Pocus, a main kid is an outsider. He's literally from a different town. They've moved to this town. He's a snarky brat who doesn't like his sister, and he hates the town's heritage of being Salem, and he doesn't believe in witches. Then he's shown wrong because witches come in his life, and at the end of the movie, spoiler alert, he's willing to sacrifice his life for his sister because he's gone through an arc. He's no longer that snarky brat that we met at the beginning of the movie. He's journeyed. And they also have that bit in the movie in Hocus Pocus where they burn the witches and they think that they're dead, and you spend like a lull in the movie and on purpose calm before the storm, before the witches come back and strike again. Like in this movie where Chip Hazard gets set on fire and then he slowly comes back, but it's too quick. There's no real calm before the storm of like, oh shit, he's back. Like, we didn't kill him properly. That didn't work. In this movie, it's like, it's just saying like, oh, he was bad once and that's enough. Like, oh, we have this forced drama with his parents, and it doesn't work because there is no real drama there. There's no conflict other than the movie wants you to believe there's a conflict.
Yeah, and one of the big things that like happens to him that's, I guess, a change in his life is, you know, he befriends Archer, but what does it really mean in terms of, you know, his past? It's like, did he need a friend?
Yeah.
And he's found one in an unusual way?
And the problem too is he's such an unnecessarily mean person towards Archer for the first half of the movie, and it doesn't really resonate as much as, say, in Hocus Pocus when that character Max is an asshole, because we understand everything. We understand he's from an outside perspective. He's this LA kid in a country town now, or whatever. Like, that's simple. You can understand that. City to country, get it. There's going to be a shift in tones and whatever, and then they're going to have a journey. But like this, it's like he's just a dick to Archer, and I just kept saying stopping. And the only reason he's a dick to Archer is so that we can prolong the journey.
Yeah,
if he wasn't, they would have found the Gorgonites in 5 minutes. We would have had this movie wrap up quicker because we need that conflict to be there. But Archer doesn't do anything to actually gain conflict from Alan. But Alan needs to be a dick so that way we can just prolong everything.
Like, the now shut up thing made sense because it's like, oh, you're a toy and I've kind of gotten over the wow factor. But once you're actually conversing with him and he's actually a person, at that point, you know, try to talk to him.
If a toy literally came to life and I had already figured out that he's like a sentient being and there's others that are under attack from like what is basically, you know, a kill squad, I would jump at the chance. But his like a refusal of the call is so forced. And that's the problem. Like, I want to like Alan. I like the performance. I thought the kid did a great job, but like I feel like it's just there for the sake of it. And then the romance is, I don't know, like it's very odd to me. Like, the film does that thing with the portrayal of characters because she has a boyfriend who's a nice guy.
Yeah, nice enough at least, yeah.
We aren't shown anything dickish about him. It's not like in Snow Day.
The most we get is that, like, you know, he sees Alan, says like, oh, I know you, whatever, and then that's
He doesn't even care. He's like, hey, I heard about this, and he's like, actually, it was this, and he's
also,
like, whatever,
also,
cool.
as we learn later, he's older, so he probably isn't even slaying the year level or whatever, so it's not like he's gonna bully him later.
And it's just like...
No school scenes either.
No, because they're weird. But then they betray his character because we never see him again, because he gets set on fire and we presume he runs out and leaves, but then later on we see his motorcycle still there. So where did he go? The film doesn't care. Like, it just needs you to know that now her boyfriend's out of the picture, we can have them together. But the film already established that she isn't a monogamous person. She makes a big deal about how, you know, she doesn't really believe in that. So she's willing to date more than one guy at a time, or like she's not faithful in that way. She's not into monogamy, which is fine, but like the film establishes that she's got this boyfriend, so you're expecting like maybe he's going to be a bully character or some dickish kind of attitude, but they didn't even want to work towards that. So it's a portrayal of that character who literally comes in to save her, and he suffers the biggest injury in the whole movie. He gets set on fire, and we never see him again.
Yeah, he's
because
just pantsless out in this
if we saw
town.
him again, we would expect him to still be a good guy. Like, there's not enough of him to really work on. So we need him to exit the film to the point in which I go, why is he in the film? So that Alan can have a conflict. Oh, she's got a boyfriend. And then at the end, he's like, we kiss because the boyfriend's gone now, but he doesn't know that. But either way,
Yeah, I know, yeah.
that's my big problem with the movie, and the dad kind of factors into that because, like, he wants to be this peace-loving, I like peace and love toys, but then at the end, he bows down to corporate evil that literally destroyed his home with war toys by taking their money. And I don't know what that's supposed to say. Like, I know the rest of the film is saying, like, the corporations win, but I don't know what the film's stating. That the dad, whose whole standpoint is that he's anti-corporate and he's anti-war toys, takes the money. I don't know what that's stating. Do you?
Honestly, when I saw that, I was just thinking, like, oh, it's just a quick gag, because they do it, like, 3 times in a row. And
Yeah.
each time, it's like well, the first time it was, like, leading up to it, but then the other 2 are like, you can't get out of this. Oh, wait, yes, you can.
And I get there's the rule of threes, but also you have the rule of threes where you break the rule at the third one. Like, this one takes it, this one takes it. Those 2 self-serving characters, Phil Hartman and Dick Miller, they're always self-serving. But the dad's supposed to be the moral high ground man. He's supposed to be a pillar of morals, apparently. Like, he's been grilling Alan this whole movie about being a morally upstanding person. And then at the end, he bows down to corporate America. What's that supposed to say? And I don't know, other than what you just said. It's supposed to be a rule of threes gag. You're not supposed to think about it. But the problem is, as an adult, I'm thinking about it.
No, I mean, like, yeah, rule of threes gag, where the inversion of the third thing's different, I guess, was trying to be a gag.
Yeah, so it's just unfortunate. But then, corporate America. Let's talk about that. That's another problem I had.
Mm-hmm.
It's very muddled. Because my big problem is Dennis Leary, at the very beginning, I don't know what his character's supposed to be all about. Because it's very conflicting. It's like, he's supposed to be corporate he's like in RoboCop, where you have the evil corporations who will do all these morally terrible things because of profit. Like, is he supposed to be that? Because then he counteracts that by being like, I want them to have a battery that lasts forever, so you never need to buy batteries again. But that's very anti-consumerism, isn't it?
It's anti, what's that term? Planned obsolescence.
Yeah, exactly. So the film wants him to be this kind of person that you stated, where it's like he's thinking about things like what we did as kids, and he has the money to do it. But then also they want him to be evil corporate America. And in the film Gremlins 2, The New Batch, they have this very similar character, and he's far more the man-child crazy grown-up man who's like got a childlike mind, and he's just like spending money wildly to fulfill these kind of childlike whimsies. This guy, he's supposed to be like a corporate shark, but at the same time, he's saying things that we believe as kids, like, I want the toys to actually do these things and interact. But it's like the way that it's portrayed, he should be the guy who would want them to be cheap and want them to be shitty and want the...
Yeah, I guess the angle they're going for is the person that we're supposed to, I guess, relate to is the David Cross character, and he's saying things that David Cross, is like getting flabbergasted at.
Yeah, but it's also he's saying things that David Cross should be agreeing with. Like, don't you want the toys to interact? But then obviously, like, that's a big hassle.
Especially when there's only 2 employees left because everyone else got fired.
But it's really this weird mishmash, right? He wants things, but he doesn't want things that go against this corporate America consumerism angle of the movie. And then at the end, he's like full-on bad guy, where he's like paying everyone money. He's got a big helicopter. He's, saying this thing and this thing. And it's just like, but what about that other guy from the beginning? And then he's like, I'm going to use these toys as literal weapons. Like... Okay, but that conflicts with what we first met him as. But also that first scene I thought was very conflicting. I don't know if you noticed that at all, if you had any feelings about that. I just felt like there was very mixed messages about it all.
Oh yeah, now that you're mentioning it, yeah. Because when I was watching it, I was just thinking like, oh yeah, he's trying to build a franchise and like putting all these positives. But yeah, the planned obsolescence thing, that's another thing. That's a thing.
That's a thing.
Yeah.
And it's just very weird to me. But then he also brings up points that I totally agree with, and the movie's saying, no, you shouldn't agree with this, which is David Cross's ideas for these toys fucking suck. Like, he's right. The corporate guy's right. Like, kids don't want what David Cross is selling. They want fun action. But then the movie's like, no, they want boring hippie toys about learning, actually. And I'll be honest with you, as a kid, I didn't want that. I
Yeah,
wanted
probably not,
kick-ass bad toys, and that's why in this movie, when I watched it as a kid, I thought the Chip Hazard toys were fucking cool and badass and epic. And that goes against what the movie's actually wanting from you. But the problem is, the Gorgonites don't do anything in the movie. They don't really do anything, and they don't really have any character or
They
conflicts.
feel obligated to not do anything too.
And that's a problem, because it's like, well, I like the Chip Hazard crew because they're actually doing things throughout the whole movie. They don't wait towards the end to do something. Like, you know, corporate America buying out the little guy at the end. That's a really scary message. Like, Dick Miller has that at the very beginning, where he's like, his truck company's been bought out, and he's just like, I'm just waiting. Like, he's completely apathetic now. Like, fuck it. Like, I don't care. And then at the end, he takes the money. And it's just like, okay, so the message is this corporate greed is consuming all the little businesses. Even, like, obviously there's a joke to be made, but Dick Miller's like, I believe one day one giant corporation will own everything. And you can just go, yeah, Disney or Apple or whatever. Or, you know, Amazon, whatever. But, like, he's right. It's basically like the market's going to be consumed by certain big companies, and they're going to rule everything, and all the little things are going to be consumed. That's great. But then the movie, I don't know, it kind of doesn't want to do that because this is a kid's movie, which is fine. It's cool, but I don't know, I want a bit more. And then my other problem I mentioned was the inherent evilness of our bad guys. As much as I delight, Bartek, in watching our bad guys, you mentioned it, the third act where they come back with a whole army of them from the toy store. I found a bit boring. One of the problems I had with it was Chip Hazard himself as a character. He maintains the same level of bad guyness throughout the whole movie. He doesn't escalate at the end. I thought him being physically scarred and war-torn and his men being destroyed, he would escalate. And I think they think the escalation is he just gets more guys. But him as a character, Chip Hazard, I wanted to see him fray at the edges. I wanted to see him to lose that formality, or to go up to 11. But he kind of maintains the same level throughout the whole movie.
Especially because that would tie into the whole idea of these toys can learn. You can, like, take that word learn and change it to develop. You know, you develop his motivations or his actions a bit more.
Yeah, and I wanted to see, after he had lost the battle, I wanted to see him to enter the war with a crazed perspective, or something terrifying, or something more than what he did when he went into the battle to begin with. He just kind of maintains the same level. Now, I've got to be honest, that final battle sequence, he's flying around on a helicopter, he's on the power line stabbing. I felt like there was a weird disconnect with Chip Hazard. Like, I kind of forgot where he was in the grand scheme of things, like where he was located at times. I felt like they focused on too many other disparate elements.
Yeah,
and
so
I just
the copies of the other toys.
I just wanted them to focus on Chip more. That's just me, and that's one of my big problems too, is like, as much as I love Chip Hazard, I just wish that he went crazier at the end. Like, just something to spike, to be like, now we've really got to take care of him. But I think the film, you know, you could argue, is the fact that he just gets more toys is the escalation. But I think the escalation of just more of is boring, because there's always that rule of, it's hard to defeat a ninja, but it's really easy to defeat an army of ninjas.
Yeah.
You know? And that's kind of what this movie did too, where it was really hard to defeat 6 of them.
Well, now that there's so many, how's the way we can take care of all of them?
Lawnmower.
Lawnmower and EMP, you know.
An EMP. I like that Phil Hartman was the one that solved the EMP problem, because he's a tech nerd.
Yeah, I really like that too, because it tied into, like, his eccentricity.
Yeah. Those are like my big issues with the movie. There's several other things, but those are just little things. But like those are my big kind of things that drag the movie down. And I'm like, you know, they contradict a lot of other things, and those are inherent problems and unlikable characters. The human characters are pretty dull in comparison to the animated ones, and then even that's not necessarily true, because the Gorgonites are barely even there.
Yeah. I guess another thing is that the Gorgonites have this, like, moral that kind of exists in its own plane of reality from the rest of the film. This whole idea of, like, just because you don't know something doesn't mean that nothing's out there.
Mm.
It's like something they learn completely separate from the plot, and that's also the ending of the film.
Yeah, because that was about wind.
Yeah. And like, because was that meant to be Alan's conflict in some way?
think
Like,
so.
yeah, I know, that's what I mean.
I think it's just supposed to factor into the fact that at the end, Archer is like, yeah, I've learned something and you haven't. And then Chip has like, yeah, you didn't learn how to win though. And I think it's like the idea is the Gorgonites have adapted to different understandings of life, while the Chip Hazards are never going to. They're just going to continue on that one mission. And what would happen to them once they finish that mission?
Their mission, is to defeat the Gorgonites, and once there are no Gorgonites, you're right.
I was more interested in, if the movie was longer and had more depth and was a different movie, I would have really liked to have seen what Chip Hazard would have done if he accidentally activated another Chip Hazard.
Yeah, like a Buzz Lightyear kind of thing.
I said that to my wife last night. I'm like, it's like when Buzz meets those other Buzzers in the
Buzz
toy
with the belt.
Yeah. And like when he goes to the toy store and he sees all the other, and it's just like, I would have loved to have seen Chip Hazard have power struggle with another Chip Hazard.
That's a really good point, yeah.
Like, what would happen if you had two of them?
Especially because we've been teased by, like, there's a guy in a Chip Hazard suit, and then Chip Hazard sees a giant Chip Hazard on top of the factory. It's like, now let's have him meet another toy Chip Hazard, yeah.
But that would be too much.
No, Toy Story 2, Small Soldiers 2. We have to escalate that way.
Smaller soldiers.
Smaller soldiers.
Where they're even
Or like
littler.
Japanese chibi Chip Hazard.
I don't know what that is.
Chibi, like tiny, super deformed
Of
kind of thing, yeah.
Super deformed.
That's what they called, SD.
Cool. I'm glad that you know that. I can't think of much else to say. It's just, it's a solid movie. Although I have a lot of negative things to say, I still enjoyed it, and I'll watch it again at some point. It's a childhood classic of mine because it was on TV. It's got these really super adult elements where there's people being stabbed a lot and brutal violence towards children that you don't see in these type of movies.
I like that they gave a toy the Wilhelm scream.
Twice.
Yeah,
that was weird. It was very odd because it didn't sound like anything like the voice.
It seemed like it was meant to be a joke, but I can't tell with the Wilhelm scream.
No, not anymore. I can't think of much else. Anything else?
No, I brought up the whole ending thing with like, oh, will they actually find something? But I guess the whole idea is, it could be anything could happen to them.
Anything can happen. Small Soldiers, a fun movie, flawed, but a fun movie. It's a good time, and it had Robert Picardo in it, and that's all I can ask for at the end of the day.
I would fist bump slam fist.
Okay, I thought you were gonna say I would just fist the movie. I'm like, okay, Bartek, that's a weird statement to make.
I would fist slam fist.
A childhood classic, I would fist. Like,
you're fisting me.
You knew that Michael McKean came back and was the voices
when I was
Sue?
When I was looking up the cast, I'm like, Michael McKean, this is someone Ryan said a lot about, and I actually did remember in my head, oh yes, he was in Coneheads.
Yeah, the best scene in Coneheads. You remember the scene?
The bucket?
Where those poor asylum seekers are just stuck in this was basically a giant metal bucket, and they're not even traveling it, and the water's not even pushing them, and he's just like the border patrol, and he's just like, go back to where you came from. We can't help you. We've got problems of our own. And it's like so unfeeling.
Also, the cat's nice in this film.
The cat was nice. Yeah. It's dead now, but it was very nice.
Very dead. Very much in heaven with the Gorgonites.
You think in heaven?
Maybe it was a hellish cat.
Can Gorgonites go to heaven?
They go to Gorgon.
Yeah. Gorgonzola. That was sad.
That was a gag in the film. Well, yeah, you're right.
That was a gag. Okay, so that's about it with Small Soldiers.
Yeah.
Before we get to the recommendation for next episode, just want to say you can find us on the social medias of Facebook and Twitter. Spit and Posh Presents. Find us pretty easy. We post some fun stuff on there. Questions and, videos and memes and, discussion of things on there. On both. We also are on YouTube, Spit and Posh Presents. We have our email, spitandpolished@gmail.com, where you can email us with your questions, queries, statements, film suggestions,
favorite Bible verses,
favorite threats. Yeah, film suggestions for stuff, for films that you're interested to hear us cover. We have a list of them. Every third episode, we do a listening people's choice. So last episode was that.
Yep, we're 2 episodes away.
So, yeah, and just, we're on all the podcatchers. So, rate, review us on whatever one's available to do so. Very much appreciated. And just, share us around with all your friends. You might be sitting here going, I love Small Soldiers, but my friend Joey, he liked it even more. Maybe he wants to hear Ryan and now make a nitpicking analysis about how corporate America wasn't really integrated well into the movie. Also, I find it very distracting that Dennis Leary is a stand-up comedian. And he just basically did his stand-up routine halfway through his speech in the beginning. Like, Dennis Leary is very much like one of those political comedians. Like, if you've seen Demolition Man, he's in that, and his character fucking sucks because it's just Dennis Leary being himself in a movie that's, like, set in an alternative future world.
Earlier in the episode when you were talking about how if you befriended Archer and, like, he gave you this conflict and you'd actually help him, I was thinking more like, you're a funny guy, how your outtake of this whole journey would be like stand-up material rather than like a coming-of-age story.
Yeah.
Like, dude, I once befriended this slam fist guy.
Yeah. Let me tell you, one time Frank Langella was the voice of a toy. So, my suggestion it is for the next episode, isn't it?
Yes.
We did yours, we did listening people
Forget
stuff.
suggestion, we'll watch the film. For
Recommendations. So the recommendation for next episode, I've tossed and turned and I was thinking about this. And in this episode, the movie had an actor that's in the movie I'm going to recommend by happenstance. I already picked it, but then this movie has this actor in it as well.
Nice.
Robert Picardo.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to be covering next episode the 1985 Ridley Scott movie Legend.
Okay.
Specifically, Bartek, the director's cut, which is 113 minutes long.
Is that longer than theatrical?
Which is 95.
Okay.
Why we have to specify is there's literally like 6 different cuts of Legend.
Oh,
there was the theatrical cut, there's the theatrical cut for the Europe, there's the TV cut, there's the director's cut, there's so many different cuts. It's one of those things I had to really think and research which cut are we going to watch. And it's like, we've said this on the show before. I wish there was a site in which it was like, which times is it actually necessary to watch a director's cut?
Film encyclopedia.
But we both know the rule of thumb is the Ridley Scott cuts of his movies are genuinely more the better ones to watch. Like Blade Runner and I want to say Heaven's Gate or whatever. But so director's cut, Ridley Scott's cut of Legend from 1985 with Robert Picardo. Oh, and Tom Cruise, whoever that guy is, and Tim Curry, whatever.
I know Tom Cruise. He's the religious dude.
Yeah, he is. So we're going to be covering that. It's been a while since I've seen it. I don't know if you've seen it.
No, I'm not sure I have. Have I even heard of it? I must have heard of it, but
you'll know something about it once you visually see it. You'll be like, oh, it's this movie.
Right.
Once a certain character turns up, you'll be like, oh, it's this movie.
Oh, this is the thing that Who's on First is from.
Yeah, well, you know one thing about it, which is if you've seen Blade Runner, they reuse unicorn footage from this movie to make Blade Runner a more surreal dream movie and just pull it out their fucking ass, Ridley Scott.
Okay.
But either way, so that'll be the movie of next episode's discussion.
1985 director's cut, Legend.
Legend.
Yep.
Fantasy film Legend with Tommy Wiseau. No,
No, Lee Jones. You said same as this film.
Tommy Lee Jones as Tom Cruise. So until next time, listening people, remember, no mercy.